Hi, I'm Josh and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be vlogging my experience reading The Battle Cry of Freedom by James M. McPherson. This is a nonfiction book all about the Civil War. It is a book in the Oxford History series, which is basically a series of nonfiction books telling the history of the United States of America. I bought this book years ago, maybe 5 years or so ago, back when the Confederacy was in the news because of the Confederate flag being all controversial. Of course, I talk all about this in my February TBR. You can check that out. As a Georgian, I can't help but recognize that the Confederacy is a big part of my history because so many people in the South lean on that as a part of their heritage. And I think it's essential that I understand the truth about the Confederacy and try and help communicate that to the people that I know and love. Which is why I felt it was important to basically vlog my experience of reading this book, why I go through and react to all of it as I'm going through it, and try and communicate some of the major points of the narrative that's going on here. And spoilers, I absolutely love this book, so I hope you enjoy my vlog and leave it wanting to read this. This was actually very well told for the most part. And the audiobook was fantastic as well. Without further ado, let's get started. So I started reading The Battle Cry of Freedom this morning. I finished both the books I wanted to read this morning before I got to school. So on the walk from the bus into the school building, I listened to the first 10 minutes of it. Sadly, my phone is destroyed, so I lost my progress. And I'm just going to start over on a spare phone that I have, which sounds like I'm rich. I enjoyed the start of it so far. It's basically starting at the Mexican War, the Mexican-American War, and we're basically going from there. He highlights how they all fought together and now about to build on how this division formed. I'll let you know when I make some more progress. I want to read it more tonight before I go to sleep. Right now the time is 7:50 and I have several blog posts ready for tomorrow. I have my video for the February TBR up for tomorrow. Today's the 31st, but I want to get my other blog posts done for the books that I finished reading this month because there are still a few I haven't posted. So that's probably going to take a couple hours. Then I can still get a little cleaning done before I go to bed, if I'm lucky, and hopefully fit in a solid hour of reading. I'm psyched. Let's get this going. Well, that took 3 hours instead of 2. But to be fair, I did keep taking breaks to watch TikTok, which apparently I'm TikTok famous now. Did not realize that overnight I got 30,000 views. And now I'm eating my burrito right before I start to clean a bit before I go to sleep. I may not get a whole hour in, but that's okay. Hopefully I'll get more in tomorrow because it's a 40-hour audio. I didn't get very far last night. I got about an hour in of the 40-hour bit. And at 2.4 speed, that tells you it wasn't actually that long, less than half an hour of listening. I woke up this morning, tried to work on some videos for next week, and my phone kept crashing when I was recording, so more than half of what I recorded is gone. So anyways, I've decided just to put that on hold for now, do some cooking and listen, cook some lentils, but that's not much of a meal. Fortunately, it's all I really had to cook because I'm out of food, so I'm thinking I'm going to go to the grocery store and keep listening. Right now it seems to be talking about how the growth of capitalism and its effect on society and its expectations for the inalienable rights of the individuals to be treated fairly, and then also how it sort of changed the way that families were able to live their lives. Basically, women became more focused on their families, while all the while becoming more educated themselves and getting the children more educated. And a part of this process meant there was a growing desire or a growing appreciation for family. So you can imagine how many people's new appreciation for a family, for the meaning of family, that sort of paves the way for Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, which really focused on how it ripped families apart. So it's really interesting to see how we're slowly working our way up to this point, right? Where we have to think about what it is that what changed to make people care. And I think it's really interesting so far. So I'm about 15% through the book. It's really good. Shocker here. It seems to be that the Civil War was all about slavery. It hasn't actually started yet in the book. There's a lot of time being spent on the divisions that are growing between the North and the South, all of which stem from slavery. There is no doubt about that. It is so clearly stated how the angers and the bitterness between the two all stem from slavery. Part of it has to do with the recent expansion that the United States went through. And because in doing that, a lot of the Southerners saw it as their opportunity to seize land and seize political power. Political power means the right to continue to expand. This wasn't about any pride in their states. It was about pride and control. They wanted the power. They wanted the right to expand and do whatever they wanted so long as it entailed slavery. It is such a misrepresentation to pretend this is about states' rights, not only because they clearly weren't concerned about their states, they were clearly concerned with their power and money. Editing Josh here. So what I'm trying to say here is that their goal here wasn't to retain the right to own slaves in their states. What they wanted was for the U.S. to continue to expand, and that those states that were gained by expansion were made slave states, so that then the slave-owning states could have more power in Congress. You see, when you have slave owners with so much power, what they want is to grow their industry. They want to expand to new locations, to new states, so they can continue to get rich and, of course, continue to maintain power in Congress. So this idea that they were worried they might lose their own states' rights was bullshit. They wanted control, they wanted power, and most importantly, they wanted the right to own a race of people for their own gain. I'm going to rein it in. Let's keep this going. But anyways, I went to the grocery store, got a shit ton of bananas and kale. I might go back again because I only have a backpack and a bag. We'll see. I need to do something because I want to keep listening, but I'm also exhausted. I may film a video. Okay, I went to the grocery store again, got more groceries. I'm good to start cooking something. Unfortunately, I am exhausted and still have to put the groceries away. In particular, I need to pluck the kale and freeze it, which will take me at least an hour or two, which is going to give me some listening. But then I have to eventually get in there and edit a video for Wednesday, which is what I want to do. In any case, making good progress. I'm a quarter of the way through. That's 10 hours of the 40-hour book. My goal, or I would ideally get to at least 33% today. But since I'm going to be reading some on Monday too and I have to go to school, I prefer to get through more than 33% so that I have less to read eventually on Monday. I also know when I have to go do things tomorrow. So today is going to be a day of listening. But I'm exhausted from the walking, to be clear. The reading is really interesting. We're continuing this narrative of we follow the continued division of the South from the North as they fight for power. So I'm going to put away some of these groceries and then probably pluck some kale. Okay, I heard this quote that I feel like needs to be addressed. I don't know why I turned the lights on. Basically about the foundation of the Confederacy, so I just want to address that, considering it's yet another piece of evidence or proof that the cornerstone of the Confederacy was slavery and racism. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstones rest upon the great truth that the black is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. So this was called the Cornerstone Speech by the Confederate Vice President Alexander H. Stephens. This was made just weeks before the Civil War began, and it was basically illustrating the fundamental difference between the Confederacy and the United States, or rather the Union. When you look at the statements that are officially made by states that succeeded, you can see very similar statements made about the reason that they're seceding, which is to say slavery and racism. I'm not sure where I left off in my last update. I'm about 30% through the book. I'm still listening. I just finished recording a couple of videos. I still have to edit them and it's nearly 10 o'clock, but I'd like to get at least one edited If not today, then I have to do it tomorrow night because I want this done before the week starts. Right now, I am just putting the books away. My laundry is nearly done, hence the Harry Potter robe. I'm really enjoying the book. Civil War has just started. I say it hasn't exactly started yet. Lincoln has just taken office, and states are succeeding simply for the fact that he was elected. The only reason the Civil War didn't happen sooner was because Buchanan continually gave in to their veiled threats, or maybe their real threats, of succeeding. And the fact is that's not how you rule. They lost the presidency to Abraham Lincoln, so they succeed because they didn't have a majority. What can you say? The Confederates, they're losers. They don't like losing. They never did like losing. Sucks to suck, though, doesn't it, Confederacy? So brave for me to speak out like that. I'm going to get to listening and doing the books away.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
And make my bed, maybe do some dishes, and then maybe start editing. Okay, so I just came across the part where Lincoln offers Robert E. Lee the lead of his command or something of that nature, and apparently Lee is or was against slavery. He thought it was immoral, both ethically and politically. But in the end, he chose to resign from the Union to fight for the Confederacy because it is where his family and children are. I guess I never heard this before, and I'm shocked to learn that Robert E. Lee considered himself a loyal member of the Union Army, someone who was opposed to slavery, both morally and politically, and then would still fight for them and become clearly a major figure in their ordeal. I don't know what I think about that, but I had to talk about it.
I am a hot mess. I made about 44% through the audiobook. Let's see, this morning I need to shower and I need to begin editing my video, which I haven't done. I at least got them filmed yesterday, but honestly I think they're a little bit choppy. I probably won't have time to finish it this morning, maybe not even today, but I'm going to get started. I'll get a little bit of listening in when I go out this afternoon for lunch. But I guess my goal will be at least 50% today, although if I can get up to 60, 2/3, that's ideal. I don't want to be stuck with half the book tomorrow, because I'd like to be done with it by Monday. There's other books I want to read. And I recognize that if I don't stick to a schedule for this one, then it will just string out, and I'll end up not being on time for other books. So what am I going to do? I think I'm going to shower first. I really need to start going to bed on time, because I never sleep past like 8.
Okay, I have not showered yet, but I did get about a quarter of my editing for one video done. And the reason I did that because I realized I need to go outside and shovel some snow, which I want to do before I take a shower. So I finished editing the video. I also watched the Super Bowl with friends. All that together made for a day of not much progress. I think I got through maybe 10%, probably 5% of the audiobook today, which is really disappointing. It just means that I probably won't finish until Tuesday. The book is interesting still, but I think, as I said before, we're talking about a lot of military conflict, and I was much more interested in the politics of it all. There does seem to be an underlying structure to all of it, like he's building to a certain point. There's a lot going into the war, and certain decisions that had to be made, such as not freeing slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation right away. And at this point, the Union was just barely staying strong enough to stand a chance against the Confederacy because it didn't take a direct stand. The Confederacy was formed by fear-mongering Southerners who didn't get absolute control of absolute everything they want. But there were still some Democrats who were in favor of slavery. So I think what we're seeing now is just basically the evolution of the war, the swaying of power, and also the building of certain significant people in history. I get the impression that all this is probably building toward a slight Union advantage, to the point where once they do have the advantage, perhaps that's when Lincoln will be in a position to make this proclamation. But I may be wrong. any case, hopefully I'll figure that out tomorrow. It's super late now, and while I could stay up, clean, and listen, I really should go to sleep. Lincoln realized that it wasn't enough just to fight for the Union, to restore the Union, to teach a lesson. It had to be the destruction and complete reset of the Union, meaning we had to emancipate the slaves as a result of their insurrection. Forgive the background noise. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation apparently is only supposed to address slaves that were in the rebellious states because it becomes an act of war against an enemy, and that is within the president's authority under the Constitution. Constitutionally speaking, he didn't have the authority to free slaves in non-rebellious states. That was when he was waiting for the Congress to pass the 13th Amendment. The bus I was waiting for was taking way too long, so I ended up walking all the way home. It took about 45 minutes, but it was great for listening to the audiobook. At this point, we've transitioned past the Emancipation Proclamation, and the story itself is focusing less on the actual battles now, and instead focusing on the politics related to that and the state of affairs among the people. And it's really interesting, personally to me, trying to understand what the populace is thinking at this time and the politics that is going in to making these decisions. There's something happened at some point that convinced Lincoln that it wasn't enough just to save the Union, which is what the goal was when he started the Civil War, or rather when he started out fighting back against those who wanted to succeed. The idea was he needed to save the Union before it fell apart. And something in the process, something happened. I'm not quite sure what the trigger point is that made him realize that it wasn't enough to save the Union. The Union was already lost. What had to be done was a complete remake of the Union. Those who seceded and basically became traitors to their nation had to be utterly punished. Their way of life had to be demolished and started anew. The laws that went into the Emancipation Proclamation and how Lincoln was able to use the fact that we had a traitor nation, which he had full right to make this proclamation, was what he went off of. He wasn't able to strictly get rid of slavery altogether. There were still Democrats who support slavery that do not want this emancipation and that are a part of the Union. And so there's this constant battle of trying to maintain power in the existing Union while trying to fight. It is a fascinating narrative to see the struggles that he has to face and the pushback that it gets. Because sadly, as much as the Civil War is about emancipation, or it led to emancipation, it wasn't necessarily about the freedom or the liberties that were deserved to black people. It was much more about saving the Union. It eventually evolved into this, and don't get me wrong, it was clearly about slaves for the South, but for the Union, it was never about that, at least not from the start. What I find interesting in this narrative is that if the South hadn't been dumb enough to try and secede just because someone got elected who never said they were going to try and abolish this anyways, if they hadn't done this, then they probably would have maintained status quo at least for a foreseeable future. The only thing that really pushed Lincoln and gave him the power to do what he did was the fact they put him in the middle of the Civil War. So in a way, they were the cause their own downfall, which is just hilarious. The idiocy of the South, the idiocy of the Confederacy. I keep thinking about this fact that General Lee thought slavery was wrong. Now, to be clear, he was still utterly racist. He did not believe that black people are equal to the white race. However, the fact that he thought slavery was wrong, but still abandoned the Union for his family, I think shows a level of cowardness. The fact that you don't have enough courage to stand up for what you actually believe in. To me, that is just the epitome of cowardice. And the fact that he is praised is just staggering to me. The fact that you would consider him an icon, that anyone would consider him an icon, is just mind-boggling. The biggest flaw I would say in this book, or at least for me, is that I couldn't follow a lot of the battle narrative. I still can't weave together a story of what led to what, which is unfortunate because I want a complete understanding. Overall, this is still at least a solid 4, if not more. It's luckily not just a war narrative. He makes sure he ties it in to the greater picture, but at the same time, I feel like he focused a little too much on the war details. Anyways, it's almost 12. I need to get a better sleep schedule. That said, I'm about 10 minutes or less away from being 75% progress, which is exactly what I want, and I can finish this book tomorrow. But I'm still really liking this, which I'm glad. This is one of those books that you look at and you can think to yourself, that's going to be so boring. Or, I mean, it has the potential of being that. It really hinges on a good author, and I think James McPherson does a really good job overall. Enough to have me go ahead and buy a couple other books in the Oxford History series. In any case, I still need to cook, but you know what? I'm going to cook tomorrow. Maybe. See how it goes. I really just go with the flow, and as long as I have something to keep me occupied when I listen to my audiobook, I don't stress too much about it. Really enjoying it. I'll keep you updated tomorrow. So Gettysburg just happened. It appears that that's going to be the turning point of the war, which I'm pretty sure is pretty well known in history. Apparently Lee resigned, or at least attempted to resign. Okay, I'm about to bike to school, listen to audiobook continuing. So I listened to more on my bike ride home, and now I'm just cooking, trying to finish the book off. I have maybe an hour at most left. What I'll say now is we're past the emancipation. We're getting so close to victory, and it's really fascinating the amount of details that were left, that remained after the emancipation. There was so much more to come. It's such a tiny part in the process. I had no idea. At this point, we're nearing Lincoln's re-election, and he is so close to losing. The Democrats are trying to take away the control of the federal government, basically the presidency. They say they want peace. Of course, Davis has no interest in peace. He will only settle for independence. Of course, the Democrats are fine with lying to the American people if it gets them in power. They may still have to continue the war if they're going to save the Union, but it is what it is. There is also a further confirmation on the fact that emancipation and the abolishment of all slaves is a necessary step in winning the war, because it is the only incentive that gets Black Americans to actually fight. Otherwise, we would be helpless, because it is so close. I never knew how close the war was. At every single point, it seems to be going back and forth on who might win. You guys, it is really interesting. I'm gonna make some kind of fried rice. Right now, I'm making Brussels sprouts. Lights, camera, Brussels sprouts. I'm also making rice, and I guess I'm going to put in the rice. Don't judge me. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm literally just saying what's in my fridge, get it stowed in the rice. So I have maybe 15-20 minutes left. We just had the passage of the 13th Amendment, and of course there's a lot of pushback, particularly from the Democrats, because they are utterly racist. They didn't like the idea of being considered equal to the black man. What I found fascinating was that towards the end of the war, the South, or at least a fraction of the South, wanted to offer the slaves freedom if they fought for them. Now you can imagine that this goes entirely against everything the South has been fighting for. The entire reason of the war was that their entire society was based on the need for slavery, that the good it does for the slaves to give them meaning or a place to exist. Essentially, it's reiterating the basic premise from the start, which is that the war was literally about slavery. It's just so blatantly obvious that anyone who tries to pretend the war wasn't about slavery is deluding themselves, and the fact they haven't looked into it enough to realize that represents an inherent bias, or perhaps even a conscious one, that is just based on basic racism. People don't seem to understand that you don't have to decide that they're less than you. Like, it does not have to be a conscious decision like that. Racism is much more subconscious than that, especially at least these days, when there is seemingly so much equality, yet there is not. If you really look into it a little bit below the surface, you begin to realize that there's a lot of bias that is basically made its way up from the past, from rewriting history to pretending like they were the honorable ones fighting for liberty, trying to rewrite history. That's just what the South loves to do. I just implore you, do the slightest bit of research. When you fly that flag, you are being racist, and also just showing your utter ignorance and a pride in that ignorance, because you take pride in this idea that the past is the way you want it to be, even though you know you haven't really looked into it. The reason flying the flag is racist is because you're letting your internal biases blind you about the truth here. And the fact is, we are a product of the times that came before us. And the times that came before us were built on segregation, slavery, and racism. That has propagated through history to today. And the only way we continue to improve ourselves is to recognize there are going to be some internal biases that we have. And if you refuse to at least acknowledge that and attempt to improve yourself, then that is your inherently racist bias coming through. In ignoring the truth, ignoring history, and refusing to stop and actually think about it, that is why it's racist. Sometimes racism can only be overcome by conscious effort on your part and mine. If you were truly immune to these racist biases which get carried down through the ages, then you would have this need and this desire to want to stop and reflect. If someone is telling you what you're doing is racist, your first instinct should be, let me stop and think about what I just did and what I just said and the way I'm approaching, the way I'm living my life. It's possible that you can come to the conclusion that's not the case, but if your first instinct is just to deny it, then you are going off of a racist instinct. Clearly there's something that bothers me. I mean, I'm from the South. And there are people that I know and that I care about who abide by this, and it bothers me so much. That's really why I'm doing this vlog, because I want to bring attention to this entire arc, the entire story, the narrative of the Civil War, and the importance of slavery and the fight for equality and liberty for all. I'm tired. It's almost 11. I'm going to keep cleaning and finish cooking and finish the last 20 minutes or so in this audiobook. So I finished. It was good. He talks about, towards the end, the different interpretations that have been taken since the Civil War. Particularly how, was it Woodrow Wilson, tried to convince the South that we should take pride in the fact that the Confederacy lost. We Southerners should take pride in the fact that the Confederacy lost. And I know I, for one, do. Now, he did extend it a bit further in a way that I felt misrepresented the history, which is like, they fought for what they believed in, which is a nice way of saying they fought for fucking slavery, because that's what they believed in. They wanted the right to own slaves. To them, slavery was a key part of their life. The way McPherson describes it is that to them, Lincoln's election was the revolution. They weren't revolting. They weren't creating a revolution. They were responding to Lincoln, the revolution of the North. In any case, it was a really good book. It was hard. Pressure. Okay. Overall, it was a fascinating book. I think I want to stop and think about my overall thoughts of the book before I conclude this. But I'll just say that it was a very quick end. One thing I didn't realize was how so much happened before the Confederacy truly gave up. The progress that was made in abolishing slavery and passing the 13th Amendment, these sorts of steps that Congress made were pretty much without the South, it seems. Lincoln came so close to losing, yet he overwhelmingly won the election, which was the people saying that this is what they wanted. One thing that is really important to note is how all the different steps that he took, he was still restricted by the powers that were available to him, given the Constitution at the time, given the state of affairs, state of politics. And it's clear that as opportunities arose, he was not afraid to grab at them. And I think that is part of what makes Lincoln probably the best president ever to have existed. I actually have this autobiography, Abraham Lincoln Alive, Volume 1 and Volume 2. This is just Volume 1, though. As you can see, it's massive. This is a series of volumes that I want to get to eventually, and so I'm really fascinated to learn more about him. I am intrigued by Lincoln and his place in all of this. All in all, it was fascinating is to think about how we got here and how easily it could have been lost. They talk about how some would say that the Union winning was inevitable because they had, I want to say, 2-1, perhaps 4-1 in soldiers than the Confederacy. At the same time, McPherson notes how there are other places that have had worse odds and still managed to last longer and to win. It seems not clear, actually. There are many different arguments we can make. A lot of them fall apart on the idea that if you sort of reverse it and say given everything that happened and you still had a winning of the Confederacy, you could usually make the same arguments based on different points in the war for the Union as well. I hate to say it, but I think we are just lucky. So I guess I want to close off this blog by talking about how overall I really enjoyed this book. It was amazingly educational and a very engaging read for the majority of the book. I highly recommend it to anyone considering wanting to learn more about the history of the Civil War. I believe I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I hope you enjoyed my blog. I said this was something I'm very passionate about, and I hope that shows here. And hopefully I didn't make a fool of myself in how I tried to articulate my argument. I also am aware this is my first vlog, and I probably could have been more conscientious of how I was holding the camera, and I will in the future, I assure you. But hopefully overall the content was entertaining and somewhat informative. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.